Alright, now we have a remix of a flashback video, D41 natural selection. Now, if you're thinking, didn't we already cover natural selection? You would be correct, except we didn't do any of the HL standards. So this is an HL only video for the remaining standards 9 through 15 at the bottom, because we waited to do these until we had learned about inheritance or genetics, because we start with the concept of a gene pool, which is all of the genes and all of the alleles in a population. And so you have 2 copies of every gene, and so you would have like all of those alleles would be counted as well. So it's just the genes and the alleles. And so what you do is you can add them up, and when you add them up, you can get allele frequencies. And so what we find is that different allele frequencies, different populations can have different allele frequencies, right? So there are certain traits that are more common in certain populations than others. And so a classic example for humans is eye color. Eye color is one of the classic human examples where you have certain gene pools have higher ratios of brown versus blue eyes, therefore changing the likelihood of you getting that eye color. Okay. And so these can be found in databases. Now, allele frequencies can change due to natural selection. What does that mean for us? So we said heritable traits can change. And so the most common example of this is our peppered moth, where it was peppered was the common allele, and the dark form was not common. And then it shifted to look like this, and now it shifted back again. So these would be the frequency of the alleles. Okay. And so you can see them shifting over time. So that's our peppered moth due to natural selection. Now, that's for a discrete trait. We learned that there are also continuous traits. And for our continuous traits, they look like this. They have the bell curve of the allele frequencies. So this would be like our beak size for our finches. Well, you can have 3 things happen. So here's our bell curve. The first one you can have happen is what's called directional selection. And in directional selection, it will move in one direction. The next one you can have happen is called stabilizing selection. And the last one is disruptive. So in this one, stabilizing, the mean is favored. Directional is one or other extreme. And in this one, disruptive, it's both extremes are favored. This one's probably the most rare. Directional is very common. That's what happens with the finches. Stabilizing is really common in birth weights. Right? So you want a very stable birth weight. Too big, you kill the mom. Too small, the baby doesn't survive. This is the same for seed size, birth weight of animals, etc. Disruptive, one of the only ones that I can think of, and it's not a super good example, is these mice that live in a white sand beach and a black sand beach. And so the gray ones die, but the white ones and the black ones survive. That is directional, disruptive, and stabilizing selection. Now, how do we know if selection is occurring? Well, that's where our worst nightmare, our best friend, Hardy-Weinberg, comes into play. Hardy-Weinberg is terrible, amazing. It really is such a great thing. You're going to love it. It's definitely, it's not too bad. You should know, we only do it for simple things where you have two alleles, a P and a Q. Well, if you only have two alleles, they have to add up to 1. So P is the allele frequency of one, and Q is the allele frequency of the other. Typically, it's dominant and recessive, but it doesn't have to be, because you could also do this for codominant or incomplete dominance. But typically, that's how you do it. Now, Hardy-Weinberg said the following: P squared plus 2PQ plus Q squared is also equal to 1. Well, this makes sense if we think about it. This would be, you take 2 P's, and then this is the double heterozygous. So he's basically saying if you did this, PP, PQ, PQ, QQ. And notice how there are 2 boxes that have PQ, which is why it's 2PQ for the middle one there. Okay? And so if one of the genotype frequencies is known, you can calculate the allele frequency from this, right? You have a system of equations. You can calculate. If you know one, you can figure out the other pretty easily. And so if you know the genotype frequencies, right? So if you know P squared, you would take the square root to find P, etc. It's a little more annoying if you're given 2PQ. Hope they don't do that to you. So now, there are what are called Hardy-Weinberg conditions. And so these are the things that a population has. And if it's in equilibrium, it means there's no natural selection, there's nothing happening. And so there must be no mutation, no gene flow, no natural selection, completely random mating, and a really large population size. And so what you can do is you test your alleles, and if they do not match, then one of these has been violated. And so you can go, it didn't match. Maybe there's sexual selection or non-random mating. Or, it didn't match. Maybe there's natural selection happening. Or, oh, it didn't match. There's gene flow, or the population is really small. So if the allele frequencies do not match with what they should be based off of the Hardy-Weinberg equilibrium, then you know that one of these conditions has not been met. And so something is changing in the equilibrium. All right, last thing. I don't know why this is its own separate thing, but artificial selection. Deliberate choice of traits. This is the same thing as selective breeding, but we're talking about it again with a different name. That's really obnoxious. And so this is, we choose it in deliberate choice of traits. And then sometimes human actions can cause things on accident. I really don't think this should be on here, but that's fine. And this would be evolution of resistance to antibiotics in bacteria. And that is, wait, oh no, a human action is evolution, is natural selection. Sorry, I didn't read it right. Is natural selection, not artificial selection. Shaking my head, why would they need that on there? So this is accidental. Accidental is still natural selection. It's only when we do it on purpose is it artificial. I'm so sorry, I didn't read it carefully enough. It's terribly tragic. I've done too many of these videos in a row. Okay, and that's the HL standards. Yay!